My son told me, "Dad, I'm too busy for your boring stories. Your old school stuff isn't relevant anymore." So I stopped calling him. 1 month later, he walked into my office to pitch his startup, desperate for investment money. His face went white when he saw my name on the door. Warren Chen, managing partner. The same Warren Chen he had been researching for weeks, calling a legend in the industry. The same father he thought ran a small, worthless consulting business. He stood there frozen, realizing the man he dismissed as irrelevant was the exact man who could make or break his entire future. My wife Colette smiled when I told her. "Our plan worked perfectly," she said. But what my son didn't know was that this was only the beginning of the lesson he was about to learn. Before I tell you what happened in that conference room, subscribe to this channel and comment below what time it is where you are right now. My name is Warren, and at 67 years old, I thought I understood disappointment. I had buried my wife's parents, survived a heart attack, watched business partners betray me, and lived through the slow fade of old friendships. But nothing prepared me for the moment. My own son looked me in the eye and said those words that would change everything between us. It happened on a Tuesday evening in March. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the brown leather one that Colette had bought me 15 years ago, worn soft in all the right places. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of my wife washing dishes in the kitchen. I had been thinking about Brendan all day, my son, my only child, and I finally picked up my phone with that familiar mix of hope and nervousness that had become routine over the past year. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, and I could already hear the impatience in the way he said hello. Sharp, clipped, like I was interrupting something important. I tried not to let it bother me. Brendan was 32 now, building his own life, chasing his own dreams. I understood that. I had been the same way once, too focused on climbing to remember the people who had helped me start the journey. "Dad, what is it?" His voice cut through my thoughts before I could even finish my greeting. I had planned to ease into the conversation, ask about his week, hear about his girlfriend Simone, maybe share a story about something that happened at the hardware store. But the tone in his voice made me rush, made me feel like I was already taking up too much of his valuable time. "I just wanted to talk, son," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "I had this interesting thing happen today that reminded me of when I was starting out in business, and I thought you might find it useful since you're working on your startup and everything. There was this situation with a supplier back in '97 that taught me about negotiation and the way you handle people who think they have all the power, and I just thought maybe. Dad, I'm too busy for your stories right now." The words landed like a slap. Around me, the house suddenly felt colder, the leather chair no longer comfortable. I'm in the middle of something important. I have investors to call, presentations to finish. I don't have time to sit around listening to ancient history about your little business dealings from decades ago. Little business dealings. That phrase stuck in my throat. I had spent 40 years building something from nothing, learning lessons the hard way, making mistakes and fixing them, creating value and opportunity. And to my son, the person I had raised, supported through college, helped with his first apartment, given money to when his car broke down last year, to him it was just ancient history. Boring stories from a boring old man who did not understand the modern world. I tried one more time. "Brendan, I just thought that since you're looking for funding, some of my experience might help. I know people, I have connections, I have seen a lot of companies rise and fall, and I just want to make sure you are prepared for what is coming. Because it is not easy, and..." He cut me off again. "You know what, Dad? I appreciate that you want to help, but your old school stuff is not relevant anymore. Things are different now. Technology is different. Business is different. I am doing things you would not understand. And honestly, sitting on the phone while you ramble about negotiations from the '90s is not a good use of my time right now." The silence that followed felt heavy, thick, like something solid I could touch. Through the kitchen doorway, I saw Colette standing perfectly still, a plate frozen in her hands, her face turned toward me. She had heard everything. Her expression told me she was furious, but she stayed quiet, letting me handle my own son, my own hurt. "Okay," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I understand. You are busy. I will let you go." "Thanks, Dad. Talk later." The line went dead before I could respond. No goodbye, no love you, just silence and the empty space where my son's voice had been. I sat there holding the phone for a long time after the call ended, staring at the dark screen like it might suddenly light up again with an apology. It did not. The house settled around me with those small, creaking sounds old houses make, and I became aware of my own breathing, shallow and tight in my chest. Colette appeared in the doorway, dish towel still in her hands, her gray hair pulled back in the way she always wore it in the evenings. Her face was calm, but I knew that look. It was the same expression she had worn when Brendan's third-grade teacher called him lazy, the same quiet fury she showed when the insurance company tried to deny my heart medication. She was angry, but she was thinking, calculating, planning something behind those steady brown eyes. "He hung up on you," she said. It was not a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. My throat felt thick with words I had not been able to say to my son, all that wisdom and experience and love that he had dismissed as rambling. Ancient history. Not relevant. I set the phone down on the side table next to my reading glasses and the mystery novel I had been working through for 3 weeks. Colette walked over and sat on the arm of my chair, something she had not done in years. Her hand found my shoulder, warm and solid and real. "That boy needs to learn something, Warren, and I do not think we have been teaching him the right lessons." I looked up at her, confused. "We raised him well, Colette. We gave him everything. Education, support, opportunities." "Maybe that is the problem," she said quietly. "Maybe we gave him so much that he forgot where it came from. Forgot that the people who came before him might actually know something worth listening to." We sat in silence for a moment, the clock on the mantel ticking away seconds that felt heavier than usual. I thought about all the phone calls over the past year, how they had slowly changed from conversations to interruptions, how Brendan's responses had gotten shorter, more impatient, more dismissive, how I had started to dread calling my own son because I knew I would end up feeling small and useless and old. "What are you thinking?" I asked Colette, because I could see the wheels turning in her mind, that same strategic intelligence that had helped me make every major decision in my life for 43 years of marriage. She looked down at me, and there was something almost mischievous in her expression now, cutting through the anger. "I am thinking that Brendan has no idea what you actually do for a living, what you have actually built. He thinks you ran some little local business that barely kept us comfortable." I frowned. We agreed not to tell him about the money, about the firm. We wanted him to grow up normal, not entitled. "Yes, and that was the right choice then," Colette said. "But now? Now he is out there trying to build a tech startup, looking for investors, acting like he invented entrepreneurship. And he is dismissing advice from someone who could actually help him because he thinks you are just his boring old dad with irrelevant stories." The realization started to form in my mind, slow and strange and almost frightening. "You want me to stop calling him?" Colette nodded. "I want you to stop calling him. No more reaching out. No more trying to share your experience. No more letting him treat you like you are wasting his precious time. Let him figure things out on his own for a while." "And then what?" I asked, though part of me already knew where this was going. Colette had always been 3 steps ahead in any situation. She smiled then, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had just seen all the pieces of a puzzle fall into place. "Then we wait, and when the time is right, we show him exactly what he has been too busy to notice. Your stories are not ancient history, Warren. They are case studies, and Brendan is about to learn that the hard way." The first week without calling Brendan was harder than I expected. Every evening around 7, my hand would reach for the phone automatically, muscle memory from months of trying to connect with my son. Each time, Colette would catch my eye from across the room and shake her head gently, reminding me of our agreement. So I would set the phone back down and try to focus on whatever book I was reading or television show we were watching, but the words and images never really registered. My mind was always wondering what Brendan was doing, if he had noticed the silence, if he even cared. By the second week, something shifted. The urge to call became less automatic, replaced by something else. Hurt, maybe, or pride. I started to realize how one-sided our relationship had become, how much energy I had been pouring into a connection that Brendan barely acknowledged. It was like watering a plant that had decided it did not need water anymore, that thought it could grow just fine on its own. Colette had created a new evening routine for us. After dinner, instead of me disappearing into my chair to call Brendan, we would sit together at the kitchen table with her laptop open between us. She had taught herself social media over the past few years, something I had always resisted, and now she showed me how to see into Brendan's world without actually being part of it. His accounts were public, full of posts about hustle culture and grinding and no days off. There were photos of him at coffee shops with his laptop, staged to look casual but clearly planned. Screenshots of business articles he found inspiring, quotes about disruption and innovation and leaving the old ways behind. Every post felt like a small knife, another reminder that he had decided people like me, people from the old world, had nothing valuable to offer. "Look at this one," Colette said on a Thursday evening, turning the laptop so I could see better. Brendan had posted a photo of himself in front of a whiteboard, covered with diagrams and numbers. The caption read, "Building something revolutionary. No time for distractions. Only forward motion. Surrounded by people who get it. No time for distractions." I read the words 3 times, each time feeling them settle heavier in my chest. That is what I am to him now. A distraction. "Keep reading," Colette said, scrolling down to the comments. There were dozens of them, other young entrepreneurs cheering him on, telling him to stay focused, to cut out anything that did not serve his vision. One comment stood out, from someone named Tyler, who seemed to be a business partner or close friend. "Your discipline is inspiring, man. Most people cannot cut off family noise to focus on the mission." Family noise. I sat back in my chair, the kitchen suddenly feeling too small, too warm. That is what our 40 years of raising him amounts to. Noise to be cut off. Colette closed the laptop with more force than necessary. "Good," she said firmly. "Let him think that. Let him believe he is so smart and focused and modern that he does not need anyone, especially not his outdated father with his irrelevant stories. Because in about 2 weeks, Warren, everything is going to change." I looked at her, confused. What happens in 2 weeks? She pulled out her own phone and showed me an email, one she had apparently been composing for days. It was addressed to someone named Preston at a company called Cascade Venture Partners. The subject line read, "Investment Inquiry, TechStream Solutions." TechStream Solutions was Brendan's startup. I had heard him mention the name during our last few awkward phone calls, always said with such pride, like he had invented something that would change the world. "What is this?" I asked. Colette smiled. "Preston is the assistant to the managing partner at Cascade. I did some research. Brendan has been trying to get a meeting with them for 3 months. They are one of the top venture capital firms in the region, and they are very selective about who they meet with. Most startups never even get through the door." My heart started beating faster, that old familiar rhythm from my years of high-stakes business dealings. "And you are reaching out to them about Brendan's company?" "Not exactly," Colette said. "I am reaching out on behalf of the managing partner of Chen Brookfield Capital Group. I am his executive assistant, and I am inquiring if TechStream Solutions would be interested in presenting their business plan to our investment committee." I stared at Colette like she had just spoken a foreign language. Chen Brookfield Capital Group. The name sat between us on the kitchen table, heavy with meaning. That is my firm, I said slowly, but nobody knows. We kept it quiet for 30 years. How did you even... Warren, I have been married to you for 43 years. Colette's voice was patient but firm. Did you really think I did not know every detail of what you built? I've been signing documents as your executive assistant for 3 decades. I know the portfolio, the investments, the returns. I know that Chen Brookfield has funded 62 companies and that 41 of them succeeded beyond projections. But Brendan does not know, I said, my mind racing through implications. We agreed when he was born. We wanted him to grow up without pressure, without expectations, without people treating him differently because his father had money. Exactly, Colette said, and we made the right choice. But now our son is 21 years old, building a tech company, desperately seeking investors, and he has no idea that his boring old father with ancient history stories is actually one of the most respected venture capitalists in the Pacific Northwest. I stood up, needing to move, to process what she was suggesting. The kitchen floor creaked under my feet as I paced. When I sold my first company in '98, when I took that money and started the investment firm, we had made a conscious decision to keep it separate from our family life. No flashy cars, no mansion, no country club memberships. We stayed in our modest house in a normal neighborhood. We drove sensible cars. We lived like comfortable middle-class people, not millionaires. Brendan thought I had run a small consulting business, something boring and forgettable that paid the bills but never made headlines. He had no idea that I spent my days evaluating startups, mentoring founders, structuring deals worth millions, and that was how I wanted it. I never wanted him to feel like he was living in my shadow or that his own accomplishments would always be measured against mine. But now Colette was suggesting we pull back the curtain. Now she wanted to use my real identity to teach our son a lesson about respect and humility and the value of listening to people who had come before. Did you already send the email? I asked, stopping my pacing to look at her. She nodded. 2 days ago. Preston responded this morning. They are very interested in having TechStream present to your investment committee. Brendan should be getting the email right about now. As if summoned by her words, my phone buzzed on the table. Not a call, but a text message. I picked it up and saw Brendan's name on the screen. My first communication from him in 2 weeks, since that awful phone call where he had dismissed me as a distraction. The message was long, breathless with excitement. Dad, you will not believe this. We just got contacted by Chen Brookfield Capital Group. They want to meet with us. This is huge. Like company-changing huge. They only invest in the best of the best. I have been trying to get in front of them for months, and suddenly they reached out to me. This is exactly the kind of break we needed. Everything is finally coming together. I read the message twice, feeling something complicated twist in my chest. Pride that my son's company was good enough to attract attention. Sadness that he was sharing this excitement with me through text instead of a phone call. And something else, something darker. Anticipation, maybe. Or justice. He has no idea, I said to Colette, showing her the message. He thinks this is luck. Random chance. A break that fell into his lap. Colette read the text over my shoulder, her expression unreadable. Are you going to tell him? I thought about it. Thought about sending back a message revealing the truth, explaining that his big break was actually his parents' engineering a lesson. But that would ruin everything. The lesson only worked if Brendan discovered it himself. If he walked into that meeting room and saw my name on the door and realized exactly what he had been dismissing. No, I said, typing back a simple response. That is great news, son. Proud of you. Good luck with the meeting. The meeting was scheduled for 3 weeks out, which gave me plenty of time to second-guess everything. Colette remained firm in her conviction that this was the right move, but I spent those weeks wrestling with doubt. At night, I would lie awake thinking about Brendan's face when he walked into that conference room and saw me sitting at the head of the table. Would he be angry? Embarrassed? Would he understand that this came from love, from a desperate need to teach him something important before it was too late? During the day, I tried to maintain my normal routine. Chen Brookfield's offices were downtown in the Hamilton Tower, 40th floor, with views of the harbor that still impressed me even after 26 years. Most people in our neighborhood had no idea I went to work in one of the city's most prestigious buildings every morning. They thought I was retired or maybe did some part-time consulting from home. That anonymity had been important to me, a way to keep my two worlds separate. My business partner, Lawrence, was the only person who knew about the situation with Brendan. We had started Chen Brookfield together back in '98, combining our expertise and capital to create something bigger than either of us could have built alone. Lawrence handled the technical due diligence while I focused on the human element, reading founders, understanding team dynamics, seeing potential that numbers alone could not reveal. "This is really happening then," Lawrence said on a Monday morning, 2 weeks before the scheduled meeting. We were in my office reviewing the preliminary materials that Brendan's team had submitted. "He has no idea his father is the Chen in Chen Brookfield." I shook my head, flipping through Brendan's business plan. The irony was thick. My son had put together a genuinely impressive presentation. His company, TechStream Solutions, was developing software to help small manufacturers optimize their supply chains using artificial intelligence. The market research was solid, the competitive analysis thorough, the financial projections aggressive but achievable. Brendan had talent, real talent, and he had no idea he had learned half of this thinking from listening to me talk at dinner tables throughout his childhood, absorbing lessons he did not even realize he was learning. "The kid is good," Lawrence said, reading over my shoulder. "This is actually investable. Are you going to be able to stay objective?" That was the question that kept me up at night. Could I separate Warren the father from Warren the investor? Could I judge Brendan's company on its merits without letting emotion cloud my analysis? And more importantly, was I doing this to teach my son a valuable lesson, or was I just a hurt old man trying to prove something? "I have been doing this for 26 years, I told Lawrence. "I know how to evaluate a startup. If his company is not worth our investment, I will tell him no. If it is worth funding, we will make a deal. Either way, he is going to learn something about respecting the people who came before him." Lawrence nodded slowly. "You know this could backfire. He might see it as manipulation, might damage your relationship even more." "The relationship is already damaged," I said quietly. He called my life's work ancient history. He said my experience was not relevant. He made me feel small and useless and in the way. This is not manipulation, Lawrence. This is reality. If Brendan wants to play in the business world, if he wants to be taken seriously as an entrepreneur, then he needs to understand that respect and humility matter, that the people you dismiss today might be the people you need tomorrow. The days crawled by with agonizing slowness. I found myself obsessively checking Brendan's social media, watching him post updates about his startup journey. He never mentioned me in any of them, never acknowledged that his father existed, let alone that his father might have wisdom worth considering. Instead, his posts were all about grinding, hustling, surrounding yourself with winners, cutting out negativity. One post in particular stung. It was from a Friday evening, exactly 1 week before our scheduled meeting. Brendan had shared a quote that read, "Success means being willing to outgrow the people who raised you. Sometimes the biggest obstacle to your future is someone else's past." Colette found me staring at that post for 20 minutes, my coffee growing cold in my hand. She read it over my shoulder, and I felt her body tense with anger. "That boy has no idea what he is saying." "He thinks he does," I said. "He thinks he is being profound, revolutionary. He thinks he has figured out something that generations before him were too stupid to understand." She kissed the top of my head, something she only did when she knew I was hurting. "One more week, Warren. One more week, and he is going to understand exactly what he outgrew." At the office, I prepared for the meeting with the same thoroughness I brought to every potential investment. I reviewed Brendan's financials 3 times, called contacts in the manufacturing software space to verify his market analysis, even had our technical team evaluate his product demo. Everything checked out. My son had built something real, something with genuine potential. Part of me swelled with pride. The other part ached that he had done all of this while actively avoiding any input from me. Lawrence assembled our standard investment committee for the meeting. Besides the 2 of us, there would be Yuki, our financial analyst who had an almost supernatural ability to spot problems in projections, and Gordon, a former manufacturing executive who understood the industry Brendan was trying to disrupt. 4 people who would evaluate TechStream solutions with professional objectivity, regardless of whose son was pitching. Does everyone understand the situation? I asked during our prep meeting, 3 days before Brendan was scheduled to arrive. Yuki nodded. She was in her late 30s, brilliant with numbers, and had been with our firm for 8 years. Your son has no idea you own this company. We treat him exactly like any other founder. Judge the business, not the relationship. Gordon, who was near retirement and had seen everything in his 40 years in business, leaned back in his chair. I have to say, Warren, this is either the best parenting move I've ever seen or the worst. Not sure which yet. That makes 2 of us, I admitted, but it is too late to back out now. Preston confirmed the meeting this morning. Brendan and his co-founder will be here Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon. Co-founder? Lawrence looked up from his notes. I did not know he had a partner. I pulled up the information Preston had sent over. Yes, someone named Jules Kimura. Apparently they met at a startup accelerator program last year. She handles the technical development while Brendan focuses on business strategy and fundraising. That is actually smart, Yuki said. Complementary skill sets. Shows he understands he cannot do everything alone. Except ask his own father for advice, Gordon muttered, then caught himself. Sorry, Warren, that was out of line. No, I said. You are right. He knows he cannot do everything alone. He just thinks the one person who definitely cannot help him is me. The weekend before the Tuesday meeting felt longer than any weekend in my life. Saturday morning, Colette and I drove to the farmer's market like we did every week, buying vegetables and fresh bread, acting like everything was normal. But nothing felt normal. Every conversation felt like it was happening underwater, muffled and distant. I kept thinking about Tuesday, about that moment when Brendan would walk through the conference room door. Sunday evening, my phone rang. Brendan's name flashed on the screen. My first phone call from him in nearly a month. My hand trembled slightly as I picked it up, and Colette paused the television to watch me, her expression carefully neutral. Hey, Dad. Brendan's voice sounded different. Not dismissive or impatient, but distracted. Busy. I just wanted to let you know I might not be able to come by for dinner next month like we planned. Things are absolutely crazy right now with the business. We had not actually planned dinner for next month. He was making up an excuse to cancel something that did not exist. Probably feeling guilty about the silence between us, but not guilty enough to actually apologize or change his behavior. That is okay, son, I said, keeping my voice steady. I understand you are busy. Yeah, it is just insane. We have this huge meeting on Tuesday with a major investment firm. Could literally change everything for the company. I have been preparing for days, running through the pitch over and over. This is the real deal, Dad. The kind of opportunity that only comes around once. I'm glad things are going well for you, I said, each word carefully chosen. What firm is it, if you do not mind me asking? Chen Brookfield Capital Group, he said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. They are legendary in the venture capital world, super selective. Most startups never even get a meeting with them, let alone serious consideration for funding. Honestly, I'm not even sure how they found us, but their assistant reached out a few weeks ago and said the managing partner was interested in our space. The managing partner, I repeated. and caught Colette's eye. She was gripping the arm of the couch, her knuckles white. Yeah, some guy named Warren Chen. Brendan said my name like he was talking about a stranger, someone completely disconnected from his life. I have been researching him. He is kind of a ghost in the industry. Does not do interviews, does not speak at conferences, keeps a super low profile. But the companies he has funded, Dad, they are incredible. He has this reputation for seeing potential that other investors miss. They call him the architect because he does not just give money. He helps build the entire structure of a company. The architect. I had not known people called me that. 26 years in the business, and my own son was learning my professional reputation from internet research, having no idea he was describing his own father. He sounds impressive, I managed to say. He is. And the crazy thing is, his investment thesis is all about operational wisdom and long-term thinking. He apparently hates the whole move, fast-break-things startup culture, thinks it is reckless. He looks for founders who understand that building something real takes time and strategy and learning from people who came before. Brendan paused, and I heard papers shuffling in the background. Which is funny because that sounds kind of like the stuff you always tried to tell me about. The words hung in the air, kind of like the stuff you always tried to tell me. Not the stuff you taught me. Not the wisdom you shared, just stuff I tried to tell him, like I had been throwing random opinions at him instead of offering decades of hard-earned experience. Well, I said slowly, maybe there is something to that approach. Maybe, Brendan said, but his tone suggested he still was not convinced. Anyway, I should go. Still have to polish the financial projections, and Jules wants to run through the demo one more time. Wish me luck for Tuesday. Good luck, son, I said. I'm sure you will do great. After we hung up, I sat staring at the phone for a long time. Colette moved over to sit beside me, taking my hand in both of hers. Her hands were warm, solid, real. He called you impressive, she said quietly. He just does not know he was talking about you. Wait, Monday night, I barely slept. I kept rehearsing different scenarios in my mind, imagining the look on Brendan's face when he realized who I was. Would it be shock? Anger? Shame? Part of me hoped for understanding, for that instant recognition that he had made a terrible mistake in dismissing me. But another part worried that this whole plan would blow up, that I was about to destroy what little relationship we had left over a lesson in humility that might come across as cruel revenge. At 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to the kitchen. The house was dark and quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself is waiting for something to happen. I made coffee and sat at the table, thinking about all the choices that had led to this moment. The decision to keep my business life separate from my family life. The choice to let Brendan grow up thinking we were comfortable but not wealthy. The years of staying quiet when other fathers bragged about their accomplishments, letting people in our neighborhood assume I was just some retired consultant. Had I been wrong? Should I have told Brendan the truth years ago, let him see what I had built, given him something concrete to respect instead of just stories he found boring? Or would that have made things worse, turned him into one of those entitled kids who thought success was inherited instead of earned? Colette found me there at 4:30, still nursing the same cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She did not say anything at first, just put her hand on my shoulder and stood there in her bathrobe, sharing the weight of the moment with me. Are we doing the right thing? I asked her. The question I had been avoiding for 3 weeks finally spoken out loud. She pulled out the chair next to me and sat down, her face serious in the dim light from the stove. Warren, our son thinks you are irrelevant. He thinks your 40 years of experience building businesses and investing in companies and learning how the world actually works is ancient history that does not apply to his modern life. He has cut you out because he believes he already knows everything he needs to know. I know all that, I said. But is this the right way to teach him different? Colette was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. When Brendan was 7, Do you remember when he tried to ride his bike without training wheels before he was ready? You told him to wait, to practice more, but he insisted he knew better, and he crashed and scraped his knee and cried. I remember, I said. He had the scar for years. And what did you do? Did you say I told you so? Did you lecture him about not listening? She shook her head. No. You cleaned his knee, put a bandage on it, and then you said, now you know. Sometimes we have to learn by doing, even when it hurts. This is the same thing, Warren. Brendan is about to crash his bike. We are just making sure he lands somewhere that teaches him something, instead of somewhere that destroys him. The Tuesday sun came up gray and cold, typical March weather in the Pacific Northwest. I dressed carefully in my standard work clothes, a dark suit that Brendan had probably seen me wear 100 times, to what he thought were boring consulting meetings. Colette straightened my tie, her fingers gentle but firm. Make him listen, she said, not with anger, not with punishment. Just make him see who you really are. The drive downtown took 40 minutes through morning traffic. I had made this drive thousands of times over the past 26 years, but today every red light felt like it lasted forever. Every mile marker a countdown to something that could not be undone. The Hamilton Tower came into view, 40 floors of steel and glass rising against the cloudy sky, and I felt my chest tighten with nerves I had not experienced since my first major business presentation decades ago. The elevator ride to the 40th floor was empty except for me and my reflection in the polished doors. I looked older than I felt inside. Gray hair, lines around my eyes, the weight of 67 years showing in ways I usually ignored. But my eyes were clear, determined. This was not about ego or revenge. This was about a father trying desperately to reach a son who had stopped listening. Preston was already at his desk when I arrived, efficient as always. He was in his mid-20s, sharp and organized, the kind of young person who reminded me that not everyone in the next generation was dismissive of experience. Good morning, Mr. Chen. Everything is set up for the 2 o'clock meeting, conference room A. I have the presentation materials ready, and the full investment committee confirmed they will be here. Thank you, Preston, I said. And the visitors have confirmed as well? Yes, sir. Brendan Willis and Jules Kimura. They will be here at 1:45 for the standard pre-meeting, security, and registration process. He paused, looking up from his computer screen. Sir, if you do not mind me saying, you seem more tense than usual. Is everything all right with this pitch? I looked at Preston for a long moment, debating how much to tell him. He had been with us for 3 years. Handled confidential information daily, and had proven himself trustworthy in dozens of situations. But this felt different, more personal than any business deal. The founder is my son, I said finally. He does not know I own this firm. He thinks I am just his boring old father who ran some small consulting business. He has been avoiding my calls for a month because he thinks my experience is not relevant to his modern world. Preston's eyes widened, his professional composure cracking for just a moment. Oh, wow. That explains why you seem so particular about the scheduling and the materials review. He stopped, processing the information. Does Mr. Lawrence know? Everyone on the investment committee knows, I said. We are going to evaluate his company fairly, Preston. If it is not a good investment, I will tell him no. But he is going to find out today that his father is not quite as irrelevant as he thought. Preston nodded slowly, understanding settling over his features. That is actually kind of brilliant, sir. Harsh, maybe, but brilliant. Do you need anything special set up for the meeting? Just the standard arrangement, I said. I want him to walk in and see everything exactly as any other founder would see it. The only difference will be when he looks at the nameplate on the table in front of me and realizes who has been listening to his pitch. The morning dragged by with painful slowness. I tried to focus on other work, reviewing reports from our existing portfolio companies, responding to emails from entrepreneurs seeking meetings, the usual rhythm of my days. But my mind kept drifting to the conference room down the hall, to the moment that was coming closer with each passing hour. At 11:30, Lawrence knocked on my office door and came in without waiting for an answer. We had known each other long enough that formal courtesy had disappeared years ago. He dropped into the chair across from my desk, his expression serious. "Last chance to back out," he said. "I can call Preston right now, have him reschedule the meeting, say you are sick or had an emergency. Brendan never has to know you were involved." I shook my head. It has gone too far for that. Besides, Colette would kill me if I backed out now. She is the one who set this whole thing in motion. "How is she handling it?" Lawrence asked. This cannot be easy for her either, watching her son dismiss his father like that. "She is angry," I admitted. "Probably angrier than I am, honestly. You know how she gets when someone treats family badly. She wanted to call Brendan herself after that phone call, where he hung up on me, tell him exactly what she thought of his behavior. But she agreed this would be more effective. Let him learn by experience instead of lecture." Lawrence was quiet for a moment, looking out my office window at the city spread below us. "You know, when my daughter was going through her rebellious phase, thinking she knew everything at 23, I wanted to do something like this. Prove to her that her old man was not as clueless as she thought. But I never had the guts. What changed things with her?" I asked, genuinely curious. Lawrence's daughter was in her 30s now, a successful architect, with a good relationship with her father. Time, mostly, and life kicking her teeth in a few times. She made some mistakes, got hurt, realized that maybe experience actually counts for something. But it took years, Warren. Years of distance and missed opportunities and conversations that should have happened, but didn't. You are trying to shortcut that process. Force the realization before too much damage gets done. I respect that. I am just not sure it will work the way you hope. "What is the alternative?" I asked, hearing the frustration creep into my voice. "Keep calling him and getting dismissed? Keep offering help that he throws back in my face? Watch him struggle and fail when I could have helped? All because he is too arrogant to listen?" "No," Lawrence said firmly. "You are right. Sometimes people need a shock to wake them up. Just be prepared for the possibility that he might not wake up the way you want. He might get angry instead of understanding, might feel manipulated instead of taught." "Then that is what happens," I said, though the thought made my stomach turn. "But at least he will know the truth. At least he will understand that the man he dismissed as irrelevant is actually someone other people take very seriously." At noon, Yuki stopped by with the final analysis report on TechStream Solutions. She had spent the weekend doing deep research, calling contacts in the manufacturing industry, verifying every claim in Brendan's business plan. She laid the document on my desk, 20 pages of detailed evaluation. "The bottom line is that his company is solid," she said, sitting down without being invited. "The technology works. The market is real. The team has the right skills. My only concern is scalability. They have 5 customers right now, all small to mid-size manufacturers. But their plan calls for growing to 50 customers within 18 months. That is aggressive, and they do not have enough detail about how they will handle the operational complexity." "That is fixable, though," I said, scanning through her report. "That is the kind of thing mentorship and experience can address?" Yuki nodded. "Exactly. Which means if we invest, we will need to be very hands-on. This is not a company you can just write a check to and walk away. They will need guidance, strategic support, connections to the right people. The question is whether your son will accept that kind of involvement from you." "That is the question for everything today," I said quietly. Gordon arrived at 1 o'clock, earlier than necessary but typical for him. He had spent 30 years as a COO for a major manufacturing company before retiring and joining our firm as an advisor. If anyone could evaluate whether Brendan's product actually solved real problems in the manufacturing world, it was Gordon. "I watched the product demo video," he said, settling his large frame into the chair next to Lawrence. "Impressive stuff. The interface is clean, the data visualization is excellent, and the AI recommendations actually make sense. I showed it to 3 of my old colleagues still working in the industry. All 3 said they would consider buying it if the price was right. That is high praise coming from you, Lawrence said. You usually hate new technology. I hate technology that does not work or that solves problems nobody actually has, Gordon corrected. This solves a real problem. Small manufacturers struggle with supply chain optimization because they cannot afford the big enterprise software packages. This gives them a solution at a fraction of the cost. It is smart business. So we are all agreed the company is investable, I said, looking around at my team. This is not charity for my son. This is a legitimate opportunity. All 3 of them nodded, which makes today even more important, Yuki said. Because if you turn him down, he will always wonder if it was personal. But if you invest, he will have to accept your involvement in his business. Either way, your relationship is about to change dramatically. At 1:30, I went to the conference room to make sure everything was arranged properly. The space was designed to impress without being intimidating. A long mahogany table with comfortable leather chairs, windows overlooking the harbor, and walls lined with framed articles about our successful investments. At the head of the table was my usual seat, and in front of it sat a simple nameplate that I had used for 26 years. Warren Chen, Managing Partner, Chen Brookfield Capital Group. I stood there looking at that nameplate for a long time, remembering all the founders who had sat across from me in these chairs, nervous entrepreneurs with big dreams and detailed plans, hoping to convince me their company deserved our capital and expertise. Some had succeeded, their businesses growing into exactly what they had promised, or even better. Others had failed despite our best efforts, teaching me hard lessons about market timing and team dynamics and the 1,000 things that can go wrong even with the best ideas. And now my son would sit in one of those chairs, pitching me without knowing it was me, hoping to impress a man he had already decided was not worth impressing in regular life. Preston appeared in the doorway at 1:40. Sir, your visitors have arrived. They are going through security now. Should I bring them up when they are cleared? Give them a few minutes in the waiting area, I said. Let them settle their nerves. Then bring them to the conference room at exactly 2:00. Preston nodded and disappeared. I heard Lawrence and the others gathering in the hallway, their voices low and professional. This was it. No more planning, no more rehearsing different scenarios in my mind. In 20 minutes, my son would walk through that door, and everything would change. Lawrence entered first, followed by Yuki and Gordon. They took their usual seats along the sides of the table, leaving the chairs directly across from me empty for our visitors. Nobody spoke. The weight of what was about to happen filled the room like a physical presence. At 1:55, I heard voices in the reception area. Brendan's voice, recognizable, even muffled by distance and walls. He was talking rapidly, probably nervous energy, probably going over key points one last time with his co-founder. I heard Preston responding, calm and professional, explaining the process. My heart was pounding so hard I worried the others could hear it. My hands rested on the table in front of me, and I focused on keeping them still, not fidgeting, not showing the storm of emotions churning inside. In my pocket, my phone vibrated with a text message. Colette, I knew without looking. She would be at home, probably staring at the clock, knowing exactly when the meeting was scheduled to start. At exactly 2:00, Preston appeared in the doorway with 2 people behind him. Mr. Chen, your 2:00 appointment. Brendan Willis and Jules Kimura from TechStream Solutions. Thank you, Preston, I said, and my voice came out steady, professional, giving away nothing. Please come in. Jules entered first. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with short dark hair and glasses that gave her a serious, focused look. She carried a laptop bag and a portfolio of materials, walking with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Her eyes swept the conference room, taking in the setup, the people, the space, evaluating everything with the quick assessment of an experienced entrepreneur. And then Brendan stepped through the doorway behind her, and the world seemed to slow down. He was looking at Jules, saying something about the seating arrangement, not paying attention to the front of the room yet. He looked good, professional, wearing a suit I had never seen before. His hair cut shorter than the last time I'd seen him. He had his laptop under one arm and was reaching to shake hands with Gordon, who was closest to the door, still not looking toward the head of the table where I sat. "Mr. Willis, Jules, thank you for coming," Lawrence said from his seat. "Please have a seat and we can get started." Brendan moved toward the empty chairs across from me, still talking to Jules about something technical, still not looking up. And then he set his laptop down on the table, pulled out the chair, started to sit, and his eyes swept across the room to the head of the table, to me, to the nameplate in front of me. The recognition happened in stages, like watching someone solve a puzzle. First, confusion, his eyes on the nameplate, reading the words Warren Chen. Then his gaze lifted to my face, still confused, his brain not yet connecting the pieces. Then understanding hit, and I watched the color drain from his face as if someone had opened a valve. He froze halfway into his seat, one hand still gripping the back of the chair. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes went back to the nameplate, then to my face, then to the nameplate again, like he was checking to make sure he was not hallucinating. "Dad?" The word came out as barely a whisper. Jules had been arranging her materials on the table and looked up sharply at Brendan's tone. She glanced at me, then at Brendan, then back at me, clearly confused by what was happening. "Hello, Brendan," I said calmly, as if this was a perfectly normal situation. "Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss." What are you doing here?" His voice was strangled, caught between shock and something else I could not quite identify. "This is Chen Brookfield Capital Group. This is Warren Chen's firm?" "Yes," I said. "It is my firm. I am Warren Chen. I own this company, have for 26 years. Brendan stood there gripping the chair like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His face had gone from pale to flushed, red creeping up his neck into his cheeks. Jules reached out and touched his arm, concern written across her features, but he did not seem to notice. 26 years, he repeated slowly, like he was testing the words to see if they made sense. "You have owned this firm for 26 years. Since I was 6 years old." "Since you were 6, I confirmed. "Lawrence and I started it together after I sold my previous company. We have funded 62 businesses in that time. 41 of them exceeded projections." The room was absolutely silent except for the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. Gordon sat perfectly still, watching the scene unfold with the careful attention of someone who knew this was a moment that mattered. Yuki had her hands folded on the table in front of her, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp, taking in every detail. "But you told me," Brendan started, then stopped, shaking his head. "You said you ran a consulting business. Small clients. Boring stuff. You never said anything about venture capital or investments or any of this." "We did not want you to grow up with that pressure," I said. "Your mother and I agreed when you were born that we would keep my professional life separate from our family life. We wanted you to have a normal childhood, to make your own way without everyone treating you differently because of who your father was." Jewel had been looking back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match, trying to piece together what was happening. Her confusion finally boiled over. "Wait, I am sorry, but can someone explain what is going on here? Brendan, is Mr. Chen actually your father?" "Yes," Brendan said, the word coming out bitter and sharp. "Apparently my father is Warren Chen. The Warren Chen. The guy I have been researching for 2 weeks, reading articles about, preparing to impress with our pitch. The legendary investor who everyone says is impossible to reach." He sat down hard in his chair, like his legs had given out. "And he lives in my parents' house, drives a 12-year-old sedan, wears the same 3 suits I have been seeing my whole life. I never needed to impress anyone with money or status," I said quietly. I had your mother. I had you. I had work that mattered. That was enough. Brendan laughed, but there was no humor in it, a sound that was almost painful to hear. So all those times I came home from school, talking about starting a business someday, about building something important, you already knew everything about that world. You could have taught me everything, but you just sat there and let me figure it out on my own. I tried to teach you, I said, and for the first time I let some emotion seep into my voice. Every phone call, every dinner conversation, every time I started to tell you about a situation I had dealt with or a lesson I had learned. I was trying to share what I knew, but you told me my stories were boring, ancient history, not relevant to your modern world. The words hit him like a physical blow. I watched him flinch, saw the memory of our last phone call flash across his face. The call where he had dismissed me, told me he was too busy for my rambling, said my old school experience did not apply to his innovative startup. Oh God, he said, closing his eyes. All those stories, they were not about some small consulting business, were they? They were about this, about companies you funded, founders you mentored, deals you structured. 40 years of experience, I said. Thousands of hours working with entrepreneurs, watching companies succeed and fail, learning what works and what does not. That is what I was trying to share with you. That is what you called a waste of your time. Jules finally seemed to understand the full scope of what was happening. She sat back in her chair, her hand moving to cover her mouth. Oh, Brendan, she said his name softly, sadly, like she was watching a tragedy unfold. Lawrence cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Perhaps we should take a moment. This is clearly an unusual situation. Mr. Willis, Miss Kimura, would you like to reschedule this meeting for another time? No, I said firmly before Brendan could respond. We are here now. Techstream Solutions requested this meeting to present their business plan and seek investment. That is still why we are here, unless Mr. Willis and Miss Kimura would prefer to withdraw their request. I looked at Brendan, watched him process the question. He could walk out right now, refuse to pitch to his own father, maintain his pride even as his world tilted on its axis, or he could stay, face the situation he had created, and see what happened next. Brendan opened his eyes and looked at me. Really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. I saw confusion there, and embarrassment, and hurt. But underneath it all, I saw something else. Recognition, perhaps. The beginning of understanding that the man sitting across from him was not just his boring old father, but someone with real authority, real expertise, real value. We are not withdrawing, he said finally, his voice steadier than I expected. We came here to pitch our company, to show why Techstream Solutions deserves investment from Chen Brookfield Capital Group. I would like to do that, if you are willing to listen. I nodded slowly, settling back in my chair. Then please, begin your presentation. What followed was the most difficult hour of my professional life. Brendan went through his pitch with shaking hands at first, his voice uncertain, stumbling over words he had probably rehearsed 100 times. But Jules supported him, jumping in when he faltered, keeping the presentation moving forward. And gradually, something shifted. Brendan found his footing, remembered why he believed in his company, and started presenting with genuine passion instead of performance. His business plan was solid. Better than solid, actually. The market analysis showed real understanding. The financial projections were ambitious, but grounded in reality, and the technology itself solved genuine problems. I interrupted several times with hard questions, the kind I would ask any founder, and Brendan answered them. Sometimes he admitted he did not know something, which showed growth I had not expected. Jules provided technical details that impressed even Gordon, who was notoriously difficult to impress. When they finished, Lawrence looked at me. The investment committee will need time to deliberate. Could you give us the room for 15 minutes? Brendan and Jules stepped outside, and the moment the door closed, Gordon let out a low whistle. That kid has talent, Warren. Real talent. And the backbone to pitch his own father after realizing he had been an idiot. That counts for something. Yuki agreed. The company is investable. The question is whether you can work with your son professionally after what happened. I can work with anyone who is willing to learn, I said. That has always been my requirement. Pride I can handle. Arrogance I can work with. But someone who refuses to listen, who thinks they already know everything, that person I cannot help. And is Brendan willing to listen now? Lawrence asked quietly. I thought about the pitch, about how Brendan had accepted my questions instead of getting defensive, how he had admitted gaps in his knowledge instead of pretending to have all the answers. We are about to find out. When Preston brought them back in, Brendan looked sick with anxiety. Jules held her laptop like a shield, clearly expecting rejection. I let the silence stretch for a moment, let them feel the weight of what came next. Chen Brookfield will invest in TechStream Solutions, I said, not the $2 million you requested. We will provide $750,000 in initial funding with the option for additional capital if you hit specific milestones. Brendan's eyes went wide. You are actually investing? I am investing in a solid business with strong potential, I said, but my investment comes with conditions. Weekly meetings where you report progress and challenges. Quarterly strategic reviews with the full investment committee. And most importantly, you accept mentorship. Real mentorship, not just funding. You listen to advice from people who have built and scaled companies before. That includes me. Brendan was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up, walked around the table, and stopped in front of me. I am sorry, Dad. The words came out thick with emotion. I am so sorry. You tried to help me, tried to share everything you knew, and I treated you like you were worthless, like your experience meant nothing. I stood and faced my son. You forgot something important, Brendan. Success is not about knowing everything. It is about knowing who to learn from. He nodded, tears in his eyes now. Can we start over? Can I call you this week? Not about business, but just to talk? To hear those stories I was too stupid to listen to before? I pulled him into a hug. Something I had not done in months. Of course you can. Your mother will be relieved. She was the one who set up this meeting, you know. She saw your LinkedIn posts about seeking investors and made sure you ended up here. Brendan pulled back, surprised. Mom planned this? Our plan worked, I said, smiling for the first time since he walked in. Sometimes the people who love you have to let you crash before you learn to fly properly. 3 months later, Brendan called me every Sunday evening without fail. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. TechStream Solutions was growing faster than projected, and my boring old stories about negotiation and team building and customer relationships turned out to be exactly what he needed. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more real-life lessons about family, respect, and second chances. Drop a comment below telling us about a time when you realize someone you underestimated actually had wisdom worth hearing. Click the video on your screen to watch another powerful story about family and redemption. Thank you for watching, and remember, the people you dismissed today might be exactly who you need tomorrow.